Well, President Trump is facing a new legal fight tonight. Cliff Sims, who wrote Team of Vipers, My Extraordinary 500 Days in the Trump White House, is suing the president. The book details alleged infighting and leaking and chaos at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. Now, Sims alleges in his lawsuit that the president is trying to silence him as he promotes his book. This comes just days after the Trump campaign filed an arbitration claim against Sims, accusing him of violating a non-disclosure agreement. When the book was released, the president attacked Sims on Twitter, calling him a low-level staffer and gopher that he hardly knew. Sims then posted these photos to make the case that the president did in fact know him, including this Trump autographed copy of the New York Times, praising Sims for his work for the 2017 GOP tax bill. Cliff Sims joins me tonight along with his attorney, Mark Aide. Cliff, what do you think it is specifically about your book that the president takes issue with? Because the fact is, you write favorably about him in the book.
Well, I think this kind of hits on one of the themes that I touch on in the book, which is that he gets really bad, often self-serving advice from the people around him. And I think ultimately he is basing his opinion of the book off of two things. One is the press coverage, but then two is what other people around him who are perhaps portrayed in an honest but unfavorable light at certain parts of the book. He's basing this off of what they are telling him. I think that's a big part of it.
Clearly, he doesn't, we know he doesn't read a lot, so he probably hasn't actually read the book itself. You think this is just people whispering in his ear saying who aren't happy about their portrayals in the book?
I think that's a big part of it. In fact, I know for certain it is. I still talk to a lot of people in the White House, and that's something that several people in there have told me directly, is that there are people on staff who are kind of egging him on with this, and so that combined with the news coverage, I think is probably the main reasons why.
And when I talked to you, you had said that you weren't sure if you had signed an NDA for the White House, but that you were just assuming you had signed what everybody else had signed.
Yeah, and that's still kind of where we're at. We are kind of acting in good faith that I did sign the same thing that other people signed in the White House. In the arbitration complaint that they sent to us from the campaign, it did include a copy of the NDA from that, so I have seen that now.
And just, Mark, just in terms of legally, this is an effort being done by the campaign, not by the White House itself. What's the distinction there?
The distinction would be significant if that were the factual truth, because what they're trying to say is that Cliff, in signing this NDA prior to service in the White House, that has essentially in perpetuity, forever applies. So if Donald Trump had lost the election and Cliff wrote a book now about his time in the campaign can certainly go after him. A private entity can go after a private person for the NDA. But that's not what's happening here. The U.S. government, through the Office of the President of the United States, has instructed, directed, authorized, approved, whatever word you want to use, to have the campaign use their auspices to enforce this NDA to quiet him with respect to his federal service. I mean, this agreement, this arbitration proceeding, actually demands that Cliff return government documents that might be in his possession, not to the government, but to the campaign. I mean, this is the White House all over it.
But do you know for a fact that this is the White House?
Well, from my own sources that I've had and other documents that I'm aware of, it gives every indication, and I firmly believe that this is President Trump given instructions to the campaign to take action. I mean, the lawyers for the campaign, from what I understand exists out there, have made it very clear that they are representing not Donald J. Trump candidate or Donald Trump running for president again in 2020. They represent President Donald J. Trump. That's the government.
Because, Cliff, I mean, the focus of your book is the time in the White House and what you saw in the administration.
Well, that's right. And actually, in the arbitration complaint that they sent to us, every single thing that they listed was something from my time in the White House. And so what our suit is really getting at is that as a federal government employee, I served Donald Trump. I served him faithfully, but ultimately I work for the American people. And so this private entity cannot basically keep me from being able to exercise my First Amendment right to talk about unclassified things that I experienced while I was working for the American people.
Is this something you actually think will go all the way through to court, or do you think this was a an intimidation move by the president or somebody around him, and that you had to respond accordingly?
Yeah, well, Mark could probably get at the legal side of that, but just having been around Donald Trump for a couple of years, and I write a lot about this in my book, especially with regard to his relationship with Congress, that he does not respond well to weakness, that he will steamroll anyone who will allow themselves to be steamrolled, and I'm not going to be bullied. And so I feel like this is not necessarily something I wanted to do. I've never sued anybody in my entire life, but I was kind of backed into a corner and put in a position where I had to decide whether or not I was going to defend myself, and I will not be bullied. And so, yeah, I'm going to stand up for myself.